Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Principles of International Business. I'm Lon Schiffbauer, your sort of virtual lecturer, I suppose. Great to have you along. Now, what we're going to do over the next 12 lectures or so is explore the concepts and theories and ideas and practice of international business and globalization. So you have a lot to look forward to. Or at least I hope you do. Now, before we get started, I'd like to take a moment and introduce myself. As I said, my name is Lon Schiffbauer, and I have an MBA and a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. Now, that does not make me an expert in international business and globalization necessarily. What does is my international experience. And this goes all the way back to when I was 13 years old or so. So when I was growing up, my father lived in the US, my mother lived in England, and so I would spend the summers and many of the winter holidays with my mother all through my junior high and high school years. And then in high school, I actually spent a year or so in France attending a French high school in a Parisian suburb called Noisy-le-Grand. And there I learned French, of course, and it's pretty shaky French these days. But I had a lot of exposure to Europe and Great Britain and the islands and everything in that region during that time. Then when I was about 20 years old or so, I spent a couple of years in Japan and yes, learned Japanese, but my Japanese is even worse than my French these days. But that gave me further international experience as someone living abroad. Then when I entered the workforce, I did a ton of traveling with Intel Corporation. I worked for Intel, and there I was part of a global international team. I lived for a while in Malaysia, and I traveled all around to, in total, about 16 or so countries. India, Malaysia, as I mentioned, Singapore, China, you name it. And during this time, I worked with and managed many international teams, and that gave me further experience in international business. So when it comes to those general principles of international business, I know my way around the block. And so I hope you'll join me as we go about this lecture series. So with that, let's get started. Our first lecture today is going to be on globalization in general. All right, the high level. And I'm going to get a little marker here so I can highlight stuff for us. What we're going to do today is we're going to define globalization of markets, globalization of production, and international business itself. We're going to make sure we understand what these terms really mean. We're going to explain how international business affects our daily lives. And then we're going to discuss the positive as well as the negative effect of international business on the world. It's a pretty wonderful, amazing, fantastic, tremendous thing, international business, but it comes at a cost. And it's very important that we understand that cost so that we can mitigate for it to the extent possible. Okay, so let's continue on. Let's first define globalization. So globalization in the broadest sense is the shift toward a more integrated and interdependent world economy. Now, I'm going to play with the idea of integrated and interdependent here in just a moment. But the idea is it is a small world that we live in, and everything is connected. Now, I personally really like this picture because this is actually a picture of South Korea juxtaposed with North Korea. South Korea, of course, having a tremendous, thriving free market economy. And actually, by the way, folks, South Korea has one of the most technologically advanced societies on Earth. So, yeah, pretty awesome. Well, you put that up against North Korea, which has really kind of, separated itself from the world economy. And the satellite picture alone tells a world of what effect that isolation has had on its society. Okay, so let's play with this for a moment. So first of all, it says here we have a shift toward a more integrated and interdependent economy. Well, you know what? Let's play with that for a moment. I'm going to get out of the way. You know what? Global business, international business has been around forever. We have the Silk Road, and we have the trade of spices and trade routes all over the world. And heck, we even have Christopher Columbus. Now, I am not going to pretend for a moment that we can celebrate Christopher Columbus by any stretch of the imagination, because he actually brings up some of the cons of globalization. We'll talk about that more later on. But here's the point. The American continent, right, was quote unquote discovered. Come on. We had indigenous people here way before Christopher Columbus. The Vikings were here way before Christopher Columbus. Nevertheless, because we live in this Eurocentric world, which is another problem, we're going to talk about that. Because we live in a Eurocentric world, we think that Christopher Columbus discovered America. Okay, leaving that diatribe behind for just a moment. He was looking for a trade route to India. He wanted to find a new trade route to India. So it was actually the drive toward greater international business and globalization that brought about the colonization of North and South America and Central America. So really, global business has been a major driver in human society from about as early as we've been able to record human society. Okay? So shift toward? No, come on. It's been around forever. But now let's back it up for a moment. It says a shift toward a more integrated and interdependent world economy. Okay, let's play with these ideas for a moment. Integrated means everything's connected, right? Everything is connected. So if you think of, say, your cell phone or a cell phone is a great example. There's all kinds of individual parts in here, but we don't look at a cell phone as a collection of individual parts. We look at it as an integrated piece of technology. There are thousands upon thousands of parts that have come from hundreds of countries. I'm not making this up. And so, yeah, it's a collection of individual parts. No, it's an integrated single product, right? And in the same way, the world economy, let me get up in your face a little bit and sell this. The world economy itself is a fully integrated economy. You can't have today's global economy and take pieces out and expect it to function naturally and properly. So, for example, recently we've had this COVID pandemic. Now, we're still in the COVID pandemic right now, but hopefully by the time you're watching this, we've been able to extract ourselves from it. Well, we've had serious disruptions in our supply chain. Remember back when you couldn't get toilet paper, or when you went to IKEA and they didn't have anything? Sure, lots of things on display, but everything was out of stock. Everything was out of stock. That's because the world economy is so integrated that if you take out even one or two little pieces, it all collapses. Okay? So pretty serious stuff. And then that brings us to the idea of interdependent. In the same way that we're highly integrated and you can't just take out pieces and expect it to work, we need everything to come together. We do not have really the capacity or the ability to make anything or provide any meaningful service without the help of other countries and their economies and their workforces and their technologies. Now, I'm going to sell this point a little harder in a moment, but the idea here is that when it comes to the economy doesn't recognize borders. Okay? There's no such thing as borders when it comes to an economy. Money flows, baby. Okay? And business flows. So when it comes to our world economy, we are all one world today. You actually have to work really, really, really hard, like North Korea, to pull yourself out, to isolate yourself from that world economy. The benefits are just too great to being a member of it. And so that's what we mean by a shift toward a more integrated and interdependent world economy. Okay? All right. So let's look at some examples and offer some more definitions. Let's talk about globalization of markets. Back in the day, right? I'm an old man. Back in the day, we would look at markets as kind of local markets, right? So for example, still today, we have local markets. So for example, when I buy equipment for my video lectures and so forth, I have a personal rule that I buy locally. And so I go to a local shop where I can get the technology I need. But even they get the technology from other countries. The point is, yes, we still do have local markets, local farmer markets and local shops and so forth. But when it comes to the world economy, corporations tend to look at the entire planet as a potential market, not just satisfied to relegate themselves to one little area. So markets are no longer viewed in terms of distinct national markets. Instead, separate regional markets are merged into one global market. Okay, so here are some examples. We have McDonald's, which is a U.S. company. Well, this is a McDonald's off in Japan. Makudo Naruto. We have IKEA, which is a Swedish company. Well, now here's a branch of theirs in the U.S. H&M. H&M is another Swedish company. Did you know that? When you're off shopping at H&M, you're shopping at a Swedish company. And this particular one is in Beijing, is in China. Okay? So we've got companies from all over the world doing business all over the world. It is one single global market. All right. Another thing to look at when it comes to global market is the size and size of this in terms of employment power and so forth. You've heard the term before, too big to fail. Well, our global market has gotten to the point of where we can't afford to let it fail, right? So let's take McDonald's, for example. Now, this particular picture is a branch of McDonald's in France. It's actually McDonald's that's on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. I know, right? The idea that there'd be a McDonald's on the Champs-Élysées. I've actually eaten at that one. Not because I like McDonald's, but because just the irony, right? Just the thought of eating a Big Mac on the Champs-Élysées, I had to do it. So, McDonald's has close to 40,000 restaurants in 119 countries when I last did this research, employing 1.5 million people. And folks, this is just McDonald's. There are hundreds and thousands of companies like this all over the world. This happens to be a U.S. company, but think of H&M, think of IKEA, think of all these other companies from other parts of the world. There are thousands and thousands of companies like this all over the world, employing people, huge numbers of people all over the world. That is an interdependent, integrated economy. Now, we're interdependent and integrated in other ways as well. Here's one of my favorites, all right? And that is the globalization of production. All right. Later on in this lecture, I'm going to make the case to you that nothing is made in just one place. All right. We'll come back to that. But here's the idea of the globalization of production. The source of goods and services from all around the globe take advantage of local differences in cost and quality of things such as labor, materials, capital, and other resources. Now, this is called not absolute advantage, comparative advantage. Don't worry about that. We're going to talk about comparative advantage in a future lecture. But here's the point. There are goods and services and resources all around the world. So where do you get the goods and services you need to make your product? Well, you get them where they are cheapest, where they are highest quality, where there are the fewest trade barriers and so forth. And so you are able to put together a high quality, affordable, functional product at a relatively low price. So let's take Starbucks coffee for a moment. Starbucks is a U.S. company. This particular branch you see here is in France, okay? A single cup of Starbucks can depend on as many as 19 countries. Between the coffee beans, the milk, sugar, and the paper cup, and let's face it, the paper cup is made up of a whole bunch of different raw materials as well. Starbucks Company is a global hub that connects some of the poorest countries in the world with some of the wealthiest. All right. We're going to come back and talk about this. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing that we're connecting the poorest countries in the world with the wealthiest countries? Is that fair? Is that equitable and so forth? We will explore this in some depth. Okay. The answer is complicated. There are both pros and cons to this. But the point to understand for right now is that when it comes to the production of just about any good, and I'm going to say any good at all, any product, it's a global product, okay? We'll explore this a little bit more in just a moment. But then we've got actual international business. Okay, so what's international business? Well, this is pretty straightforward. Cross-border exchanges of goods or services or resources such as people, intellectual property, and contractual assets or liabilities between two or more nations. Now, here's the thing. When we think about international business, we often think about importing and exporting or, shopping and so on and so forth. But international business goes way beyond that. As it says here, we're talking about people, all right? So when I worked in Malaysia, well, I served an expat assignment over in Malaysia. I'm working there. When I was studying in France or working in Japan, this is international business because we put my butt on an airplane and sent me over there. Intellectual property such as patents and so forth, contracts, trade, licensing, and so forth, and other assets or even liabilities. We can move things all over the world. It's more than just importing, exporting. We can move all kinds of ideas and people and assets and liabilities all over the place. That's international business. Okay, so let me give you an example. I live in, what is essentially Salt Lake City, Utah in the United States, okay? I actually live in Sandy, but for my international students, you get Utah, Salt Lake City, United States. Well, here in Utah, in Salt Lake, we have a big old copper mine. That's a big copper mine in I think it's the Ochre Mountains. They're east of me. East? No, west. I don't know. No. They're west of me. Anyway, Rio Tinto owns the Kennecott mine. And Rio Tinto is an Australian company. So I'm in the United States, and one of our largest employers is this great big huge mine, which is an Australian company. So we've got international business going on. How profound is it? Well, Rio Tinto employs 46,000 people in 36 countries, right? Now, when it comes to Utah, Rio Tinto employs about 2,000 Utahns. All right, is that a lot? It's a fair amount. It's good for the 2,000. But here's the thing, folks. That's direct jobs. We've also got 14,000 indirect jobs. Now, what do I mean by indirect jobs? Well, it's classic Adam Smith invisible hand. If you employ me, well, then that means I need to employ a grocery store, and I need to employ gas stations. I need food, I need gas, I need movie theaters, I need all kinds of things so that I can live a thriving life, right? And so when a company comes in and employs a bunch of people, these people in turn employ a lot of goods and services around them, which in turn employ a lot of goods and services around them, so on and so forth. Like I say, this is classic Adam Smith invisible hand theory of capitalism. So here we have an Australian company here in the United States in Utah, really benefiting a lot of jobs, creating a lot of jobs. But there's more to it, okay? Once again, I'm focusing on the fact that I am here in Utah, right? But don't worry, in this lecture series, we're going to do a whole bunch of different examples from around the world. But staying with the example of Utah, metals make up more than 40% of our exports. So Rio Tinto, an Australian company, is here in Utah pulling out copper, but then they are exporting that copper all around the world, right? Well, now we're going to see where in a moment, but check this out. In 2017, we exported here in Utah $11.5 billion worth of goods and services. 1 in 4 jobs here in the state of Utah is tied to international trade. Now, where are we shipping all this stuff? Well, United Kingdom, we sell $2.3 billion worth of goods and services. Let's see. Oh, okay, goods, and then a whole bunch of million in services, right? Hong Kong, Canada, China, Mexico, here in Utah. So let's back up for just a moment and kind of show you how this all works. Rio Tinto, an Australian company, comes here to the United States in the state of Utah and builds a mine, employs a bunch of people, takes out the copper, and then takes that copper and exports it to the United Kingdom, to Hong Kong, to Canada, to China, and Mexico. So international business is not this sort of, and globalization is not this sort of vague, ambiguous concept that you learn about in theory. This is running our economy. This is running our economy. Okay? All right. Now, we've already seen a taste of how globalization affects our daily lives, right? I made the case that I, here in the state of Utah, in the United States, I am profoundly affected by globalization, okay? But let's play a game here for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way here, and I'm going to pull this up for a moment. So here are a bunch of brands and companies that you are very familiar with. Let's see if you can figure out where each company is based. All right. Now, we'll start easy. Samsung. Now, personally, I have a Galaxy Samsung phone, and so I know that Samsung comes out of South Korea. And like I said, South Korea, beautifully technologically advanced society out there. They make great gear. Adidas. If any of you wear Adidas, Adidas tend to be very popular around the world. Well, Adidas come out of Germany. And then we have Panasonic. They make a lot of consumer electronics and so forth. Well, you probably know that Panasonic comes out of Japan. Okay, then we have HSBC, Financial Services. Now, you may or may not have heard of HSBC, but in some parts of the world, they are ginormous. Well, they're out of England. Okay, have you ever pulled up into a Shell gas station to fill up gas, petrol, whatever you want to call it? Well, they come out of the Netherlands, all right? Now let's take Gerber, for example. Now, I don't know about where you're from, but here in the United States, there isn't an American baby on the face of the planet or on the face of our nation that has not grown up on Gerber food. I exaggerate, but you get what I'm saying. Well, Gerber comes out of Switzerland, okay? Now let's get real. How about Budweiser beer? This Bud's for you. Well, those of you who are watching this in the United States are probably saying, Budweiser. Budweiser. Well, you're probably wrong. It's Belgium. A Belgium company acquired Budweiser some years ago. So when you're having a Bud, you're having an international product. Okay, what about Ben & Jerry's? Now, you know that Ben & Jerry's, for those of you who don't know Ben & Jerry's, they make really, really nice ice cream, kind of high-end ice cream. And Ben & Jerry's was started by a couple of hippies in Vermont in the United States named Ben and Jerry. I mean, really amazing origin story. Started in Vermont. So obviously they are you guessed it, Britain, Netherlands acquisition. They are owned by Unilever. This is a multinational conglomerate that buys all kinds of companies all over the world to basically create a portfolio of companies to make money off of. And so, Ben & Jerry's international. Okay, 7-Eleven. You guys already know at this point that I'm trying to trick you, so you're not going to say the United States for 7-Eleven. Where is 7-Eleven based out of these days? Japan. They were acquired by a Japanese multinational conglomerate some years back. And so when you pull into 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee, I know you don't do that, but when you do, that's ka-ching for Japan. Okay, last one, Haagen-Dazs. Who makes Haagen-Dazs? That is the only American company on this list. Haagen-Dazs has always been an American company. And in fact, when you think about, why are they called Haagen-Dazs then? I would have thought that would be the international one. Well, it's a made-up word that was just meant to sound, sort of cosmopolitan. Okay? So the point is, I believe that when it really... Oh, sorry, wrong button. Let's come back over here. I'm going to make an assertion. I believe that there is no such thing as 100% made in, and you name the country, okay? There is no such thing as made in America, all right? 100%. No such thing as made in France, made in Britain, made in England, made in Germany, made in Japan, made in Indonesia. No such thing. We are so integrated and so interdependent as a global economy that no matter what we look at, it has an international component. As a matter of fact, I am going to go so far as to say you are not even 100% made in whatever country. Even if you have never left your hometown, from the day you were born to the moment you're watching this lecture, you've never left your hometown. Doesn't matter. I guarantee you have consumed, whether eating or using, you have consumed some sort of international product or service. You've done it, okay? So I kind of invite you to let go of the idea of nationalism. Let go of the idea of USA, USA, or Vive la France, or whatever country you're in right now. Actually, most of my viewers, excuse me, I'm coughing away at you. How rude. So about 25% of my viewers tend to be in the United States, and then I have Britain, I have India, Philippines, and so forth, people all over the world. Well, you know what? You're all over the world, and we're on the same planet, and we're part of the same economy. And so nationalism, when it comes to an economy, doesn't fly. And we're going to see that in this video lecture, in this series of video lectures. Okay. Now, you have, of course, if you're here in the United States, or maybe even if you bought something overseas, you've seen a tag that says Made in the USA. What does Made in the USA mean? Well, let's check this out. And this is from the federal government in the United States. For a product to be called Made in the USA, or claimed to be of domestic origin, whatever, all or virtually all of it needs to be made in the USA. Okay. Well, there's no such thing as all. Let's look at what we mean by virtually all. Virtually all means that all the significant parts and processing that go into the product must be of U.S. origin. You know, there must be no or negligible foreign content. I want you to check out some key words here, right? So, significant parts. Oh, that one was too dark. That's, that's too dark. So, significant parts, right? Contain no or negligible foreign content, right? So, the point is, you're not going to get all. So, let's keep exploring this. What about the raw materials? What about the raw materials? Well, when it comes to made in the USA, or made in France, or made in India, or made in the Philippines, or made in Australia, where you folks are watching, it depends on how much of the product's cost and raw materials make up and how far removed they are from the finished product that they constitute. So let me give you an example. If we are talking about a gold ring, so this here we go. Here's my wedding ring. All right. Gold ring, wedding ring. I don't know if we can get a focus on that or not. I don't know where it was made, but it almost doesn't matter. So here's the thing is it says, well, if we were to say made in the USA, but the gold came from a mine in another country, then made in the USA claim would be deceptive because this ring is valuable because it's made of gold. The very fact that somebody took the gold and pounded it into the shape of a ring is irrelevant. The real value of this ring is the raw material from which it's constituted. So we can't call that made in the USA. But on the other hand, what if we're putting together a part like in this one that the government offered as an example? They're talking about a clock radio. Yeah, a clock radio. Like you guys have a clock radio. Holy smoke. Let's just talk about this bad boy right here. Okay? A cell phone. Well, you can say made in America when it comes to the raw materials of the plastic, because yes, the plastic comes from oil that was pulled out of the ground off somewhere else and processed into plastic. But you're not buying this phone because it's made of really awesome plastic. You're buying it because of the technology and the use and so forth. So wherever this phone is manufactured, they can say made in South Korea or made in China or made in the US. However, that doesn't mean that every part or component is made in those countries. It just means that it was assembled, all these parts and components and raw materials were assembled in such a way as to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Therefore, yeah, you can say the US or wherever it was made. So it gets tricky. But the fact is even if it's made in wherever country you say, I guarantee you it's not 100%. Okay? Because when you really get down to it, the rabbit hole can get deeper and deeper. What about the origin of the machinery used in the manufacturing process? The machinery, right? So right now I'm creating a video. My product is this video. Is it made in the USA? Well, yeah, that's where I am right now. But all the machinery, the technology that I'm using to make it, it's not from the US, right? What about the raw materials? What about the facility? The house that I'm in right now, this isn't 100% US. There's all kinds of material in this facility, in this studio where I'm making this. The power that I'm running, where's that from? The equipment used to generate the power. You see how this rabbit hole can just keep going and going and going. The point is, we have an extremely integrated and interdependent economy. And we all need each other. We all really need each other. Okay? But now hold on. Are there costs? Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Now, I want to be clear. I'm a big fan of globalization. I'm a big fan of international business. But these costs are real and significant. So we need to look at these and we need to figure out how we are going to mitigate for these the best we can. All right? So let's explore some of these. First one is loss of jobs. That's kind of a favorite one, right? Favorite because it really hits us at an immediate level. Right? Now, and a lot of folks talk about manufacturing jobs and so forth, or service jobs and low wage jobs. That's what you'll hear the most. But I've got news for you. All jobs go everywhere. Okay? So let me share with you for a moment my story. So I used to work for Intel Corporation. They are a global company. They're based in California, but they're all over the freaking place, right? And I was part of a global organization, and so worked around the world, worked with folks all around. And at one point, I was working here in the state of Utah for Intel, and Intel decided to close the site in Utah and to take those jobs and ship them around. Now, they shipped them all over the place. A lot were domestic. They stayed domestic and so forth. And in fact, you even had the option. You weren't laid off. You were like, hey, we're going to close your site. You have a choice. You can leave or you can move, right? So I won't tell the whole story now, but Intel did good by us. Intel did really good by us. Anyway, a lot of the jobs were shipped overseas, including my job, including a lot of the payroll jobs. A lot of the payroll jobs went to Costa Rica. And in fact, many of the payroll managers moved to Costa Rica to train the new Costa Rican payroll employees and then came back to the United States, expat assignment. My job and the job of a lot of my employees, and this is a white collar MBA, college educated. These are college educated jobs. They went to Malaysia, Penang. And so I moved to Penang for a short while to train my replacement and the replacement of my team and then come on back. I want to reiterate, You don't know all the details. I can tell you the details at some time. Contact me. I'd love to share the details. But Intel treated us really well during this. All right. So the point is, jobs are being shipped from the US to other countries and from other countries to other countries all the time. And by the way, jobs are coming here to the US all the time. We don't talk about that a lot. All right. But jobs are coming here all the time, and jobs are going to your country all the time. But what we tend to focus on is the loss of jobs. And don't get me wrong, this is real. This is serious, especially when it comes to like manufacturing and so forth. You could lose an entire industry. Now, in the case of me moving jobs over to Malaysia, we did not lose an industry. Okay, trust me. When it comes to internal communications in an HR department, we didn't lose an industry. But when it comes to manufacturing or services, sometimes you do. All right, let's keep exploring this. Manufacturing employment, and this is from a U.S. perspective for those of you watching in other countries. Manufacturing employment was steady throughout the 1990s, about 17.5 million, but by 2016 went down to 12.3 million. Okay, I said billion before; it's million. That's a pretty significant drop, right? Labor-intensive sectors relying on low-wage jobs took the biggest hit. About 40% of the job losses in the furniture industry and 45% in the clothing industry were caused by shifts in trade. Furniture and clothing, I have no doubt. And as a matter of fact, you're going to see in this lecture series and so forth, a lot of examples of clothing industry being moved to Costa Rica and Bangladesh and so forth. And the furniture industry, well, do you shop at IKEA? Yeah. It's all over the world now. Used to be nice in Lowell, Massachusetts, but not anymore. Okay. So this is real. Check this out, right? Once again, we're talking about the manufacturing sector just because there's a really strong juxtaposition to look at in terms of the manufacturing sector. But please understand the white-collar sector as well and the intellectual sector and the management sector and so forth, it's being hit as well. So check this out, right? Real output is the blue line, while employment is the red line. Now, is a lot of this because of automation? Yes, a lot of this is because of automation, and we are going to explore that in this series. But a lot of that automation even is being done abroad. All right, so another one to consider is lack of regulations. This is a concern that many folks have. Take, for example, environmental regulations. All right. Now, these are pictures from some demonstrations in Seattle, Washington, in the United States, years and years ago, when all the global powers were having a global trade conference and so forth. And there were a lot of demonstrations and so forth. They had many, 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 many concerns, but a large concern was around the effect of globalizations on the environment, globalizations, on global business and international trade, on the environment. Different countries have different trade environmental regulations. And so a manufacturer can go to one country and get a part manufactured with lower regulations, therefore lower cost. Or when things are shipped all over the world as they are, which we will talk about, this has an environmental impact. And so when different countries have different regulations in terms of the environment, this can have a detrimental effect on the environment. Same goes when it comes to labor, okay? Different countries have different laws, rules, and regulations in terms of labor. Now, I want to talk about this for a moment because oftentimes, no, I shouldn't say oftentimes. I will say what I thought. When I was growing up and I heard about child labor, I thought two things. I thought, well, that's mostly a relic of the past. I mean, yes, I know child labor still happens, but not anywhere near the extent that it used to, was my thinking. And furthermore, what child labor there is primarily in the agricultural and textile industries. So they're out there picking fruit or sewing shoes, and shirts and so forth. I was wrong. All right. Child labor and forced labor is rampant and furthermore affects so many industries. So this is some data, and this is data from the United States Department of Labor. They estimate that there are 152 million children involved in child labor in 2016, and that there are 25 million people involved in forced labor. Okay. Those are big numbers. For those of you playing at home, those are big numbers. All right. Are they primarily in agriculture and textiles? No. I know you can't read this slide, so I'm actually going to put a link to this PDF in the description below so that you can explore this in more depth. This is a report from the Department of Labor in the United States when it comes to international labor issues like child labor, forced labor. Let's check this out. You can read the big ones. Coffee and sugar. Do you consume coffee and sugar? You engage in the child labor and forced labor market. Cell phone? Yes. This has child labor elements to it, especially in COBOL. Gold? This bad boy right here. Chocolate dessert? Oh, come on. You know you eat chocolate. You know you like chocolate. Clothes, as we mentioned. I have no idea what went into the manufacture of this shirt. This is a favorite shirt. I enjoy this shirt. I like this shirt. All right. I have no idea what went into it. Toys, sushi, makeup. All right. Leather and shoes. These are just a few examples. And the write-up on this kind of explains a little bit about how child and forced labor goes into the manufacture of these goods. Once again, I'll put a link to it in the description below. This is serious. This is real. This is disconcerting. All right. And if we are going to engage in international business, which we are going to engage in international business, we always have, we need to take these sort of concerns very seriously. Then there's another concern, and that is in supranational organizational policies. Supranational, all right? Supranational, a supranational organization is basically an unelected bureaucrats or supranational organizations such as the UN and World Trade Organization. They can impose policies upon, different countries addressing domestic issues. So, for example, there are certain things that if your country, and the United States does, for those of you watching in the United States, if your country belongs to the World Trade Organization or the UN, and I can pretty much guarantee that they do, then the World Trade Organization sets policies around international trade that your country needs to abide by. So in the US, it's not that our elected officials put in place those trade policies. The World Trade Organization put in place those policies, and because the United States belongs, we need to obey them. Now, For those of you watching from Britain and so forth, you'll recognize the concerns of supranational organizations when it comes to Brexit. That was a major concern around the decision for Britain to leave the EU, the European Union. There were many, many, many reasons. But a strong driver was the fact that there were bureaucrats off in Brussels setting policies that were having what those who chose to leave Britain perceived were having a negative effect on domestic policies. A supranational organization is a multinational union or association in which member countries cede authority, give up authority and sovereignty in, independence, at least some of the internal affairs to the group, whose decisions are binding on its members. In short, member states share in decision-making on matters that will affect each country's citizens. Okay? Now, that was from a website called Investopedia. This is real. This is serious. And as we saw with Brexit, can have significant effects. All right? Another concern about globalization is it exacerbates the wage gap. Those who have the resources, and when it comes to capitalism, baby, it's all about there's a reason capitalism is called capitalism, because you need capital. You need capital to be successful in capitalism. If you have capital, you are going to rock and roll at the same time. If you do not have capital, then you're just along for the ride. All right? Well, this can exacerbate a wage gap. So let's look at some statistics. This is in the United States, by the way. The richest 1% take home 188 times as much as the bottom 90%. And for those of you playing at home, you and I are part of the bottom 90%. Okay? These guys take home 188% more than we do. All right? Top U.S. percent income share has doubled while poverty has held steady. So, since 1969 all the way to 2017, the 1%, they've seen their wages double, while poverty in the United States has been pretty constant. If you have capital, you can play in capitalism. If you don't have capital, all you have left is ism. Richest Americans have had the fastest income growth. Check this out. This is the income growth of the richest Americans, whereas the bottom 20% has had relatively moderate income growth. Globalization has a big part to play in this, because as the economy, which feeds this, becomes more integrated and interdependent, they can leverage it. Okay. So, in summary for us, globalization is here. It has always been here, and it isn't going away. Globalization is just the way it is. The benefits of globalization are awesome. They're totally awesome, tremendous, fantastic. I love the benefits of globalization. However, the moral, ethical, and economic costs associated with globalization are real, and in many cases are heinous, egregious, and repugnant. Okay? So, I personally believe that the goal is not to curtail or roll back globalization, but rather to find better, more ethical, and egalitarian ways of doing business internationally. And my friends, That's why I am so glad that you are participating in this lecture series. Because if we can really understand the principles of international business and see how they affect both us and not only our community and our countries and the world and all the individuals in it, then we can make more ethical, sound, and moral decisions in how we go about international trade and business. And that's what I'm really hoping we can do. All right? Thank you very much for joining me on this first of our 12 lectures. I'm looking forward to having you along when we come back. I believe we're going to be talking about culture, which is a great topic. So I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Until then, have a fantastic day.